Okay, any dedications?
No, I hope we all make a full refuah. We all look pleased.
Yeah, okay. So first thing, I had something from this book that we used until a few months back, but in this week's Parsha, Tetzaveh talks about the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, for his avodah in the temple. And I actually heard this last night at the shir I went to in Jerusalem. So there were different, after every avodah, the Kohen had to go into the mikveh and had to change, and it had different sets of clothing, because he had to look pure. I mean, some of the things were made out of white and blue tunic and different shades of red, etc. So each time he went into the, like for instance, one of the things was clearing the ashes, and that obviously made a discolored a garment, so he couldn't go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim wearing that. He had to change to go in a mikveh. So what?
Right.
And what we hear in how we can relate to it in modern day times, and we've all heard this, is that a Talmud Chochem is not allowed to have a mark on his clothing because it could be considered a chilul Hashem. He has to look in pristine condition and in always respectable at all times. So you're not going to see a Talmud Chochem, a big rov, going to a falafel place or shawarma place where he eats a falafel and the tchum and the tachina falls onto his jacket. You won't see them eat, or like a pizza place. You're not going to see them there, Gavin. Or, huh?
Yeah. So you're saying that people that are from should also be scrupulous in creating an image, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, look, if I mean, I don't wear suits and that. Just try and look respectable, or whatever one wears. Yeah, so like, that's the story. So that's where they get it from.
Okay.
That's the source of it. From the Kohen had to change his into different sets of clothing for different I've thought.
Okay, sounds good. All right, guys, we got a half an hour before of Simcha. All right, so we're on the 98th daf, and we learn from Rabbah, who says that one who burns a loan document of his fellow is not liable to pay. And we say why? Because, he deprived the creditor of the ability to collect the loan stated in the document. So, because he can say to his fellow Jew, I burnt a mere paper of yours, meaning that since the document has no inherent value, no actual damage has occurred, guys. It's not like he burnt the guy's property. So, although his act deprives the creditor of his ability to collect the loan, it's considered causative damage for which there's no liability. So, when you read the word causative damage, I think you should look at it as indirect damage, meaning if you set alight somebody's property, you have to pay for it. If you destroy the mechanism for him to be able to collect that loan, there's no liability. And I actually don't understand this concept of just because it's causative or indirect that it gets you off the hook. I don't get it. Maybe you guys can offer an insight. I mean, just for a minute before we go on.
If it's causative, just say that again. If it's causative,
Look,
then it's
Rabbi wants to propose, and we've learned this often. We learned it in Sanhedrin, and we learned it with various Rabbonim, that indirect damage, there's no liability. So basically, if you're at the beach and you tie somebody to the pier, and the tide comes in and he drowns, you can't be given the death penalty. You're responsible under heaven in Shemaim for the theft or for the murder or anything else, but it's not considered direct. It's almost like you hire a hitman. The agent is, there can be no agency through, no transgression through agency, meaning the person that decided to take out that hit contract is not liable, but the hitman is. And so to here, if you burn somebody's ability to collect a loan by burning the loan document, you're not liable, only if you burnt his property. But both are preventing him from either collecting land or getting his land back. If you burnt his actual land, there's liability. If you've burnt the document enabling to get his land, there's no liability. So guys, it doesn't make sense to me. But there is another opinion. And I just want to tell you what that is in the Gemara, and then maybe we can look at the issue. So according to Rabba, we said one who burns a loan document of his fellow is not liable to pay, but he says to his fellow, I burnt a mere paper of yours. So the Gemara notes that Rabba exempts him only because there's no actual damage to the property, and one is not liable for causative damage. But Rami Bava Kamma objected. He said, look, what's this case that Rabba refers to? If there are witnesses who know what was written in the document, let them write for him a proper document. In other words, what Rami Bava Kamma is actually saying is, look, if there's any way to replace that damaged loan document, and there are witnesses that testify to the fact that a loan was actually given, they know what was written in the document, because a person, apart from a loan document, should be put to testify as witnesses. Now, if you write an affidavit, you also need two witnesses with a contract, etc. So those witnesses need to be to court and write a replacement document for the lender, enabling him to collect a loan. So in that case, burning the original document doesn't even really constitute much of a causative damage, only maybe a slight legal fee. And even then, he should be responsible for the legal fee, in my 2 cents worth of opinion, by the way. But the problem comes is that if there are no witnesses who know what was written in the document, then how do we know what was written in it? Meaning, if we don't know what was written in the document, according to the Gemara, in any event, we wouldn't be able to ascertain the extent of the burner's liability. And then there's no need for Rabba's statement to teach us that he's free from paying, because there's no way to enforce the payment. Okay? Because what are you going to make him pay? You've burnt the evidence. So the Gemara says, well, what happens if you burnt the evidence? So Rabba says, let Rabba's ruling be interpreted as referring to where he believes him regarding the amount that was written in the document. In other words, who believes who? Do you believe the person, the creditor, or do you believe the debtor, or the person that actually burnt the document? So that's a discussion in and of itself of the Gemara. But what we are saying is here, if you have witnesses or you believe the person who testifies, in that case, we know how to write a new document if they're witnesses. But if there's not, why shouldn't we make that person liable for the damage that he's caused the other person? So Rava doesn't agree with Rabba. So the Gemara is then, guys, going to tend to link Rabba's ruling to an earlier dispute, a Tanaic dispute, if you will. So you've got Rav Dimi Bar Chanina, who said the ruling of Rabba, that one is not liable for burning the loan document of his fellow. What's the case contingent on? Upon a matter of dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. And if you remember, we discussed that in the 74th Mishnah of Bava Kamma. So just to give you a bit of a heads up, according to Rabbi Shimon, right, if you remember, he said that something that can cause a benefit of money is considered as money. And basically, you're liable for burning the loan document of your fellow in that case. Meaning that what we learned, if we learned about the careful payment, the twofold payment for theft, or fourfold or fivefold payment for selling or slaughtering a stolen ox or sheep, right? That's not paid in the case of Hekdesh property. In other words, you've dedicated an animal to the temple, and the temple takes that animal over. Because if you remember the context, in fact, Kevin was in South Africa last June or July. Or it could have been the year before. We did this year at his house, by the way, where basically a thief steals an item that belongs to Hekdesh, the temple. He's not liable, because you're only liable when you steal from your fellow Jew. According to the pasuk where it says he steals it from his fellow. There is another opinion that says you are definitely liable for Hekdesh. But according to Rabbi Shimon, you're not. But Rabbi Shimon says there is an exception. So what happens is you haven't given it to the temple yet, but you've got an animal that you've set aside that you vowed to bring as a sacrifice, and you let temple custodians know. But on the way to taking that animal to Hekdesh, or when the people that work for the temple have taken the owner over, the robber steals it. In that particular case, you've got an obligation, if you made a commitment or an oath, that you have to replace the designated animal with another animal of sacrifice. And therefore, there's a loss not only to Hekdesh property, at which the robber isn't liable in certain cases, but you're responsible to that Jew, because that Jew has to replace the missing Hekdesh sacrifice. And since it costs money due to the loss of its non-existence, and the original owner must replace the sacrifice, in that sense, there's a financial attachment to an article. It's not just lost to Hekdesh. And therefore, the robber has to replace that animal and can't say it belongs to Hekdesh now. So Rabbi Shimon is saying, with regard to this document, he disagrees with Rabbi completely. He's saying, look, well, you burning the document isn't a mere piece of paper. You've prevented the creditor to collect the money from the debtor. That's what you've done. And therefore, it's cost him money. So therefore, whoever burnt the document should be liable for that money. How do you ascertain that money? Well, it's difficult, because if you don't know what that money is and there are no witnesses, then how can you believe the debtor? Because he wants to make sure the money that he pays back is less. And how do you believe the creditor? Because the creditor is going to make more money back. But I'm assuming if the creditor and debtor could get together and agree on what was discussed, and both are honorable, then in that case, a new contract can be drawn out. What happens if you get somebody to rob on your behalf? If you're the debtor because you don't want to pay back the loan, and the creditor says, well, he owes me such and such, and the debtor turns around and says, well, I owe you no such thing, then there's a bit of a problem. But in principle, what Rabbi Shimon is saying is different to Rabbi. He's saying you didn't burn mere paper. You've basically crippled the ability for the creditor to get back the money borrowed by the debtor. And therefore, it costs a loss to its fellow. It's not about burning some abstract principle. It's as if you burnt his field, because that's what you've caused him. The rabbinical opinion is very different. The rabbinical opinion is saying something that causes a benefit of money is not considered as money. In other words, yes, the creditor has lost money because he cannot collect that money, but it's not as if he's burnt actual money. And if the robber burnt actual money, he would be liable for replacing that money, but he wouldn't be liable if he burnt the loan document. Okay, because that loan document is just a conceptual document, like a piece of paper. My question to Rava would be, and I'm not ready to speak to Rava till 120 years, by the way, I'm just telling you guys, is that what's the difference if you burn a loan document or you burn money? They're both concepts. Maybe Rava holds, or maybe the rabbis hold, that if you burn money, that doesn't need replacement either, because you're burning a concept. Maybe they only consider burning of an asset, a physical asset, to be replaceable by the damager, or if that asset is stolen by the robber, but not the conceptual value of what that loan document is worth. You get what I'm saying? So Rabbi Shimon would agree that that concept has value. So what do we do with this? Because the rabbis agree with Rabbi, and Rabbi Shimon is the lone opinion. And I seem to gravitate towards Rabbi Shimon here. What do you guys think before I proceed onwards?
Well, the actual document is worth money. I mean, they couldn't copy things, or they weren't, people wouldn't write a second copy. And, but if people remember, but if the creditor remember, if the debtor remembers what he owes, then
Yeah, you know
That
what? So
shouldn't be a problem
Kevin's brought up a good issue. There are two issues. One is the method to try and recover the money, at which if they're witnesses and an honorable debtor and creditor and some lunatic burnt the papers, it's fixable. But it's not as fixable, guys, if the debtor is lying to get out of the debt, or the creditor is greedy and he can't be trusted.
Damon, you're going to have to go back 30 seconds. You froze for about
A minute,
20
a
seconds there.
minute.
Yeah, so Kevin's right. The principles of how to recover from that loss with legal measures is a separate issue. I think our issue is trying to see the rabbinical opinion and how to know that Rabbah and the rabbis see it as mere causative and burning papers, not burning a ability of somebody's mechanism to collect. I don't know. I don't know how the rabbis work it. And I don't know how Rabbah and the rabbis see it in that way. I see it according to Rabbi Shimon. So we need to ask Rabbi Kabb because it doesn't make sense to me. Not because it doesn't make sense, but because I don't understand. So the Gemara objects, and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, said, one could say that what you have heard about Rabbi Shimon, that he holds that something that can cause another party the benefit of money or a monetary loss is in fact considered as money, is something with respect that is inherently money, as in the following example given by Rabbah. So what's that example, guys? That when Rabbi Shimon stated his ruling with respect to one who steals and slaughters a consecrated animal, in that case, you're dealing with an animal itself, guys. It's got intrinsic value. And that when it legally belongs to Hekdesh and it gets stolen, the owner has agreed to replace the animal should anything happen, and therefore he has to lose money. But an animal is an actual money. It's not, is an actual asset. It's not money. Money is an abstract asset. It says it has a certain value to it, but it's not an actual value like a consecrated animal. So what he's saying is, what the Gemara is saying, according to Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, is that maybe Rabbi Shimon holds that in the case of Hekdesh, in the 74th daf, is that you're dealing with a real animal that's a tangible asset, and that because the owner has to replace it if that animal goes missing from Hekdesh because he pledged an animal, then it's as if you're burning the asset or destroying the asset. But when he pledges money and somebody steals it, you're stealing mere papers that have this concept of representing an asset, and therefore that might not be included in Rabbi Shimon's argument with Rabbah. So that's the proposal from Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua. Because what's he basing it on? Rabbah said if one stole chametz before Pesach and someone else came along and burnt it, if he burnt it during the appointed time for burning chametz, like when everybody else does, he's not liable to pay. Why? Because everybody is commanded to burn it. Every Jew, whether that Jew's a robber or a straight Jew, whatever the case may be, is a commandment to burn it. So there's no liability. He's fulfilling a mitzvah. But if he burnt it after Pesach, when in fact you can make use of chametz, it's contingent upon the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. Why? Because, guys, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that something that can cause a loss to the owner or a benefit of money, when they mean a benefit of money, the benefit of money means you don't incur a loss also. Meaning that if you have to replace the animal of Hekdesh with another animal, you're benefiting in money because you're not having to replace a loss. And therefore, according to that actual tangible asset, it's considered as if it's money, and therefore the robber is liable. But according to the rabbinical opinion, it says that something that can cause a benefit of money, meaning that it saves the owner money, and it because you'd have to replace it, is not necessarily considered as actual money. There's no liability. In other words, if an asset goes missing, say somebody steals your TV set, then in that particular case, you have to replace it with a TV set. You can see this is not a Haredi audience. They don't even have TV sets. So maybe that's a bad example. Giving a secular example.
No, I was about I was about to ask you, what is the
No, but
TV?
Damon,
But
in the
you
shuls
beat me
here in
to it.
Israel, they use TV sets to display the zmanim and the times in shuls.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damon, sorry, before I forget, sorry, because I'm not feeling 100%. I might forget this point. You know that issue on the indirect. You know why? This is just a gut feel. I'm just taking a chance with this. Maybe the reason why you're not responsible at all is because when it's direct, you know exactly what the intention is. When it's indirect, you just don't know what that intention is. Because if it's unintentional, then that person will be let off, right? So he's obviously going to say, so it's going to be your word versus his. There's always going to be a mess there. So that's why they just go for the benefit of the doubt, you know? And that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, and I want to address what you're thinking. Is that I think you've got a fair point. In certain cases, you can't pick up intent. But I think if somebody's screaming, help me, and you give them concrete shoes, okay, and you tell them to appear when the tide's coming in and say, I'll see you in another lifetime, and you wait for the tide to come in, and the witnesses that hear the guy screaming and him saying, ciao, buddy, I hope you have a nice drowning. The intent is clear. He's still not responsible for murder and the death penalty. Even
But
if
Damon, he didn't do anything concrete about that situation.
very funny.
No, but that's a very good example. That's a very extreme
Yeah.
example. And that's a perfect
Yeah.
example.
Shoes are shoes.
So,
What can I say?
No, that
Concrete
was a
shoes
good
are
answer. I can't say anything. So now I'm confused as well.
Yeah,
Give a more concrete example, Damon.
I just thought that the majority would be not the majority would probably be unintentional if somebody knocks something out of your hand, you know. But I suppose not.
where I
How do you
think
prove
intent
intention?
definitely plays a part,
Yeah.
where Gavin is right, is that we would certainly, if a guy came home and his wife was stopping your best friend, and the guy in a maniacal rage shot his wife and his best friend, and afterwards he mourned his best friend, he would they might give him a bit of mercy.
Which could be his wife, because that's also considered your best friend. But then you wouldn't.
Yeah, James, I like the way you just cut out the wife. No, it's more than his best friend.
So
it's actually very, very funny.
So all I'm saying is the court might have more mercy on him than if he decided to plot with this one woman to get rid of the ailing husband and take out a $3 million life insurance policy on the husband that's to be late after he was given a cocktail of cyanide and arsenic. In other words, when there's premeditated, calculated murder for greed and adultery is involved, they're more likely to kill him with the death penalty than when he, in a fit of anger and rage at seeing his wife having an infidelity, reacted. In other words, their intent wasn't premeditation or sinister greed and adultery. It was pure horror and the emotions getting the better out of him. So intent certainly does play a part in secular law. That's for sure. Just one other point, just to finish on this note, is that the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis is, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that something that can cause a benefit of money by not paying for a loss is considered as if there is actual money, and therefore there's liability for the person that has damaged that other individual, even if it's considered abstract, like burning a mere document, because his inability to collect on the loan is affected. But according to the rabbis who say that something that can cause a benefit of money is not considered money, he's not liable. So what it's saying is maybe they're just dealing with a case where you're dealing with an actual asset like an ox. But what happens if where the ox that was given to Hekdesh has to be replaced if it's stolen, even though it belongs to Hekdesh, the original owner made a pledge. So we're saying that might be a different case. But what happens with the case with Pesach, or with respect to something that's not inherently money? In other words, it's an abstract concept that on Pesach, chametz is prevented, and if you own chametz during Pesach afterwards, it renders it permanently not used. So do we say that Rabbi Shimon holds that as well, since it caused a benefit of money, it's considered as money? In other words, chametz became prohibited for benefit and is presently worthless. So the burner then would be liable to pay the value of non-prohibited chametz to the robber. Why? Because chametz is something that causes the robber a benefit of money. Okay? Because if the burner had not burnt it, the robber could have returned the chametz himself. But if he stole the chametz and Pesach passed on to it, he can say to the original owner, like, what is yours is before you, the chametz is no longer in existence, and the robber will have to pay the value. So that's according to Rashi. So the bottom line of it is conceptual possible loss of money considered the same case as an actual loss of money with regards to a pledge, where you're dealing with an animal? What? Okay.
Now my daughter
went to Krav Maga. She said bye. I said bye.
I thought you said why. Okay. So, all right. So just quickly, Kev, what we're saying here is, does it make a difference when there's two factors here? According to Rabbi Shimon, if you're going to cause somebody a loss, then in that particular case, even if it's a conceptual loss, it's cost the person money, and therefore it should be taken seriously, and that person has to be responsible. According to Rabbi and the rabbis, if it's a mere abstraction of loss, meaning you're burning a document and you're not burning their property, there's no liability. Then the question is, if you're going to use the example of hekdesh animal, where the pledge has to be replaced, there you're dealing with an actual animal. You're not dealing with a concept of money or what that money represents, or the fact that a loan document represents a collection of money. Since it's an abstract concept of loss, is it the same as actual loss with the hekdesh replacement of a pledge animal, where the robber has to pay the original owner, because he wouldn't have to pay just with hekdesh. He has to pay the original owner because the original owner has to replace the pledge. So the issue that's brought up is Pesach. Pesach is conceptual. Why? Because if you use chametz during Pesach, or are in possession of it, and you don't even use it, you can never use it again. And therefore you've cost a loss, where he's lost out on that ability to profit or utilize it after Pesach. And again, that's conceptual. So that's the argument the other way around. All right, guys, I think we're done. We've got Rav Simcha in about 10 minutes. I wish you guys a good evening. Yeah.
So this that's obviously, if he didn't do the bir chometz and mevater it, then it's he can't use it. He can't derive any benefit after the week of Pesach.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're saying, is that if you bring in the rules of Pesach, you're also dealing with an abstraction there. That's exactly what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the exact same abstraction. So it doesn't mean literal, it doesn't mean abstraction in terms of replacing benefits and losses. Yeah. All right, guys, I wish you a good evening.
Yeah. Arthur?